Harrison Vance pushed the door open to the VIP suite on the top floor of the city's premier private maternity hospital, casually tossing a limited edition orange Hermes box onto the genuine leather sofa. "Eleanor, look what I brought you." The acquisition in London dragged on, and my connecting flight was delayed. The hospital room was dead silent, the bed made as flat and white as a block of ice, without a single crease. Even the smell of antiseptic in the air was faint. Harrison's mother was standing with her back to him, slowly slipping a dented Yeti thermos into an eco-friendly tote bag. Harrison loosened his tie, frowning. "Mom, where is Eleanor? Did she take the kids for a checkup? She just gave birth a few days ago. Why is she running around?" The nurses did not even try to stop her. Beatrice Vance zipped her bag and turned around. She looked at the bespoke tailored suit on her son and the deep red striped tie, clearly chosen by another woman. Her eyes grew cold, as if looking at a complete stranger. She signed her discharge papers 4 days ago. Harrison's fingers paused on his tie knot. She left? Back to the Westchester mansion? He scoffed, unbothered, pulling up a chair to sit. Her temper is getting worse by the day. Is it just because I couldn't make it back in time for the delivery? Are 3 nurses and you not enough to wait on her? She has to throw a tantrum over such trivial things. Let her move out with the babies then. Beatrice cut him off, pulling a thin sheet of paper from her bag and placing it squarely on the orange Hermes box on the coffee table. "Here, this is what she left for you. Harrison, are you satisfied now?" Harrison's gaze reflexively fell on the paper. The bold words "divorce petition" stared back at him. His eyelid twitched violently, the smirk on his lips instantly freezing. His fingers resting on his knees suddenly clenched, his knuckles turning white. He stared at the paper, his Adam's apple bobbing, but he could not utter a single word. 5 days ago, in the master bedroom of the Westchester mansion, Eleanor Vance leaned against the bed frame, forcing herself to stand. Being 34 weeks pregnant with triplets made even the simplest breath feel like pulling a heavy bellows. Her legs were so swollen that even the largest men's slippers could not fit. The veins on her calves bulged like purple vines. The phone on the nightstand vibrated. She reached for it. It was an iMessage from Harrison. "The education summit in London is running late. Still have a few venture capitalists to meet. Flight is delayed for 2 days. Has the nanny sorted everything out? I transferred $50,000 to your card. Tell Maria to buy whatever you need. If the house is short on anything, let Julian know." Eleanor looked at the cold bank transfer notification on the screen. Not a single word of inquiry, not a single word of concern about her dangerously high-risk prenatal checkup metrics from that morning. Just money and work instructions, exactly as always. She opened the keyboard, typing out her response. "The doctor said today my cervix has shortened. There is a risk of severe hemorrhage and premature birth." Her fingers paused on the keys. She waited 2 seconds, then deleted it, letter by letter. She replied with a single word, "Okay," and put the phone down. Eleanor picked up the glass of warm water on the table and took a sip. Stomach acid surged up. She covered her mouth, dry heaving violently. The phone lit up again. This time, it was a priority notification on Instagram. Vanessa Sterling had updated her story. There was no caption, just a photo. In the photo was a delicate slice of French red velvet cake with a number 28 candle on it. Next to it was a man's wrist, using a silver knife to cut the cake. On that wrist was a shallow burn scar, and he was wearing the Patek Philippe watch that Eleanor had saved up for half a year to buy for him. It was Harrison's hand. 7 years ago, when they started their business in a leaky basement apartment, Eleanor was burned by a hot electric stove while cooking soup for him. Eleanor stared at that scar for a long time. Suddenly, a heavy, agonizing pain radiated from her lower abdomen, accompanied by a rush of warm liquid that quickly soaked her pajama pants. She abruptly doubled over. The glass in her hand shattered on the carpet, the water spreading fast. The pain was like a rusted saw blade slicing through her spine. Eleanor bit her lower lip hard, tasting the metallic tang of blood. She fumbled to press the emergency call button on the nightstand, her voice escaping through gritted teeth. "Maria, call an ambulance." Outside the emergency room of Manhattan General Hospital. The wheels of the gurney rolled over the cold tile floor, making a harsh, deafening clatter. 34 weeks pregnant with triplets, premature rupture of membranes with severe contractions. The nurse's voice was fast, fighting for every second. The white fluorescent lights overhead flashed by one. Eleanor could barely open her eyes. "Where is the family? Where is the family?" The chief surgeon stood by the gurney holding a stack of papers, his face pale. The situation is critical, accompanied by placenta previa. She could hemorrhage massively at any moment. We need to perform an emergency C-section right now. Family must sign the consent form. Eleanor was in so much pain that cold sweat soaked her entire body, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks. She gasped for air, her fingers gripping the metal rails of the gurney so tightly, her fingernails were nearly bending backward. My husband is overseas. She swallowed a mouthful of bloody saliva, her breath hanging by a thread. I will sign it myself. A high-risk triplet delivery. How can you sign for yourself? Once on the operating table, if we have to remove your uterus, who makes the call? The doctor frowned, slapping the paper into the nurse's hand. Call her proxy for authorization immediately. Trembling, Eleanor pulled her phone from her pocket and called the PIN number at the top. A long ringtone played, then automatically disconnected. She called again. Still a long ring. Another wave of contractions hit, feeling as if her lower abdomen was being ripped in two. Eleanor's vision went black, a muffled scream of absolute agony escaping her throat. Maria stood to the side, stomping her feet in panic, praying continuously. Mr. Vance is not picking up. Madam, hang in there. I will call his assistant Julian. An exclusive Michelin-starred restaurant in Mayfair, London. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was a glittering view of the city at night. Inside the restaurant, a cello played a melodious tune. Julian Pierce held his endlessly vibrating phone, walking swiftly down the thick carpeted hallway. Standing outside the carved door of the VIP dining room, he peeked through the gap. At the head of the long table, Harrison Vance was raising a crystal wine glass. Beside him, Vanessa Sterling, wearing a couture red dress and a sparkling smile, was leaning in to blow out the candle on her cake. Thank you, Harrison. You remember every year. Vanessa's voice was soft, carrying just the right amount of dependence. Harrison set his glass down, his tone familiar and relaxed. It is only right. These past few years, thanks to you charging to the front lines for our new projects, the corporate empire wouldn't have expanded into Europe without you. The phone vibrated frantically again. Julian took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Mr. Vance. Julian's tense voice shattered the atmosphere in the room. A call from the States. Mrs. Vance's water broke. She is going into the delivery room. The doctors say it is critical. The hospital needs your immediate family authorization. Harrison's eyelid twitched imperceptibly. He turned his head to look at Julian, frowning. Isn't her due date still half a month away? It is a premature triplet delivery. The doctor says it is complicated by placenta previa. She could hemorrhage at any moment. Julian spoke as fast as a machine gun, offering the phone toward him. Harrison reached out for the phone. Harrison. Vanessa suddenly spoke up. The cake knife in her hand paused midair as she tilted her head to look at him. The investors will be here any minute. The PR department is still waiting for our group photo for the press release. If you leave now, what happens to the stage we have set here? The European merger is the passion project we have been chasing for 6 months. Harrison's hand stopped midair. He looked at Vanessa, then at the caller ID displaying Maria on the phone screen. 17 missed calls. Tell Maria to instruct the hospital to use the highest standard of medication. Harrison withdrew his hand, leaning back into his chair. His voice returned to its familiar calmness and the coldness of a commander. Send the signature authorization. Tell the legal department to draft an emergency proxy form and email it over. Julian gripped the phone, his knuckles turning white. Mr. Vance, it is Triplets. Mrs. Vance's life could be in danger. Please just answer the phone. Julian. Harrison's voice dropped, carrying the oppressive weight of authority that allowed no questioning. The hospital has the most professional team. My going back will not replace the doctors, and answering the phone will not solve a medical problem. Go handle it. Do not make me repeat myself. Julian stood frozen. He looked at the man's utterly entitled face, a wave of nausea churning in his stomach. He closed his eyes, bowed his head, turned, and walked out of the VIP room. Operating Room 1, Manhattan General Hospital. The shadowless white lights shone directly on Eleanor's face. Patient's blood pressure is dropping. Systolic 70, diastolic 40, heart rate spiking. Prepare the blood bags. The anesthesiologist's voice sounded like it was coming through a thick curtain of water, distant and blurry. Eleanor felt cold, a chill seeping out bit by bit from her bones, accompanied by an empty, dizzying sensation as her blood drained away. Outside the operating room, Maria held the electronic authorization form Julian had sent over. Her hands shook so violently she could barely hold the pen, crying as she scribbled Eleanor's name on the paper. Lying on the operating table, her arms secured to her sides, Eleanor felt the tug of the scalpel on her abdomen. Even though the anesthesia blocked the sharp pain, the sheer terror of her life rapidly slipping from her grasp was magnified infinitely. The heart monitor beside her emitted rapid, urgent beeps. "Eleanor, do not sleep, stay awake, think of your babies." The chief surgeon, face covered in sweat, shouted her name loudly. 17 missed calls. He still had not made a single call back, not even a voice message. In the final moment, before her vision went completely black and her consciousness sank into the abyss, a strange calmness suddenly washed over Eleanor. She did not think about Harrison cutting a cake with Vanessa right now, or meeting investors. She did not even think about how absurd his logic of his physical presence not replacing a doctor was. Her only thought was, if I die on this operating table today, who will take care of my 3 children? Beatrice was old. Harrison only knew how to solve problems with money. He would throw the children to highly paid nannies, or in the near future, hand them over to that woman he praised for charging to the front lines for him. A strong physiological nausea surged up. No, she could not die. She absolutely could not lose her life over a man who did not even bother to answer her call. She could not let her children fall into that absurd world. The chain named Mrs. Vance, quietly and silently snapped completely at this moment, under the blinding white light of the surgical lamp. Intensive care unit. The monotonous sound of machinery filled the cold space. Eleanor opened her eyes. The ceiling tiles gradually came into focus. As the anesthesia wore off, the pain from her contracting uterus and the surgical incision on her abdomen tore through her. That pain reminded her she was still alive. "You are awake?" The on-duty nurse came to check her drainage tubes, her voice carrying a trace of lingering fear. "You really walked right through death's door. You lost 2,500 milliliters of blood. We almost could not save your uterus. The 3 babies are all in the incubators. Their condition is stable for now." Eleanor opened her mouth. Her throat was as dry as swallowing sand, unable to make a sound. She blinked slowly once, signaling she had heard. Tears flowed without warning from the corners of her eyes onto the pillow. Only she knew this was not the joy of surviving, but the dull ache of a belief that had once supported her entire life being uprooted completely from her body. She was moved to a regular private room 2 days later. The private suite was filled with expensive floral arrangements Harrison had ordered Julian to buy. The strong scent of lilies was overwhelming. Beside them were stacks of imported organic recovery broths and luxury wellness hampers. Maria handed a fully charged phone to Eleanor, who was leaning against the headboard. Maria carefully watched her expression. "Madam," Mr. Vance called. "He said he finished his business there and will land tomorrow at the earliest." Eleanor took the phone. On the screen was an unread message sent 2 hours ago. "Harrison, you have had a hard time. I have already asked a specialist to pick names for the 3 babies. Rest well. I will come see you tomorrow. I transferred $2 million to your card. Tell Julian to buy whatever you like." Still no explanation as to why he did not answer her calls that night. Still the same entitled arrangements and cold transfer figures. If this were in the past, during the neglectful periods of her pregnancy, Eleanor would have called him feeling wronged. She would listen to a few perfunctory comforting words like how the company had to feed thousands of people, and he was exhausted too. Then she would swallow all her disappointment and continue being the understanding Mrs. Vance. But now, Eleanor looked at the text on the screen, her eyes gazing at it like a spam message that had nothing to do with her. She opened the input box, typed, "Okay," and hit send. After sending that word, she placed the phone face down on the nightstand. She did not cry. Her eyes did not even turn red again. She closed her eyes and began to calmly make a list. Step 1. Contact the doctor to confirm her current condition and find out the earliest she could get out of bed. Step 2. Contact her old college friend, Victoria Kensington, a top-tier lawyer specializing in marital asset division and financial auditing. Step 3. Find a new place to live. She did not want to stay in this hospital room, filled with the stench of lilies for one more second, let alone see Harrison's entitled face. That afternoon, the door to the room was pushed open. Julian walked in carrying a leather briefcase. His eyes were red. Seeing Eleanor leaning against the headboard, his steps faltered. Eleanor had lost so much weight, her face pale without a trace of color. The back of her hands was covered in needle marks and bruises, but her eyes were so bright they sent a chill down one's spine. "Madam," Julian approached the bed, speaking softly. "Mr. Vance's flight has taken off. He asked me to come check on you first." "What are all these things?" Eleanor leaned against the soft pillows, her calm gaze falling on Julian's briefcase. Julian, you were there that day, weren't you? Julian's fingers suddenly tightened, warping the leather handle of his briefcase. Eleanor's voice did not waver. There was no questioning, no resentment, no loss of emotional control, as if she were discussing an unimportant report. Did he not hear the phone, or did he feel there was no need to answer it? Julian swallowed hard, his throat tight. He had followed Harrison for years, accustomed to cutthroat business negotiations. But in this moment, he dared not look Eleanor in the eye. Mr. Vance was attending Director Sterling's birthday party. Julian bowed his head, his voice trembling, spilling the entire truth. The investors were also present. He said the hospital had a professional team and his going back would not replace the doctors. The room fell into a dead silence, save for the humidifier in the corner, spewing fine mist with a faint hiss. There was no emotional collapse or crying as expected. No throwing glasses at the wall, no hysterical screaming or cursing. Eleanor merely looked quietly at the gray sky outside the window. Not even her breathing changed. Madam. Julian could not bear this suffocating silence and could not help but speak up. I know. Eleanor cut him off. Her voice was lighter than the humidifier's mist, and much colder. Julian looked up at her in shock. Julian, do me a favor. Eleanor turned to look straight at him. Handle the discharge procedures for me. Right now. Her voice was calm and clear. But madam, you only gave birth 3 days ago. Your incision has not healed. The doctor said you need to be observed for at least a week. Julian's eyes widened in astonishment, hastily waving his hands. Do the discharge procedures, Eleanor repeated. No further explanation, just a command that allowed no questioning. Julian looked at her resolute eyes, opened his mouth, but ultimately said nothing. He turned and walked swiftly out of the room. The door closed. Eleanor threw back the blanket. The movement pulled at the incision on her abdomen, a sharp pain shooting like an electric current through her body. She gritted her teeth, gripping the edge of the bed. Her arms shook so much they could barely support her body weight. Large drops of cold sweat broke out on her forehead, but she did not stop. She inched her way off the bed until her feet touched the cold floor. Inside the closet were a few sets of change clothes Maria had brought. Fighting the pain, she took them out one by one, folded them neatly, and stuffed them into a canvas duffel bag. Every movement felt like someone carving a new gash into her abdomen, but her mind had never been clearer. The late nights staying up in that freezing basement, helping Harrison draft business plans. The afternoons suppressing her morning sickness to learn how to cook soup to please Beatrice. The time sitting alone in the hospital corridor with ultrasound printouts, waiting endlessly. All of it, in this moment, she packed up completely along with this 7-year marriage and threw it into the trash. Eleanor folded the last baby outfit into the canvas bag and pulled the zipper, stretching the incision on her belly. She sucked in a breath of cold air, gripping the edge of the cabinet tightly, her nails scratching against the wood with a piercing screech. Cold sweat dripped down her pale cheeks into her collar. The door was pushed open. Julian stood in the doorway holding a stack of papers, his face pale, panting. Madam, the discharge paperwork is done, but the hospital requires you to sign a voluntary liability waiver. Give it here. Eleanor let go of the cabinet and stood straight. Julian handed the paper over, his hand still shaking. Madam, are you really not going to reconsider? Mr. Vance's flight lands in 3 hours. If you leave now, he will be furious. Moreover, your health. Eleanor did not take his pen. She pulled a black ballpoint pen straight from her bag, uncapped it, and signed her name on the signature line. The pen scratched through the paper, the force bleeding through to the back. Back to the Westchester mansion? Julian asked. I will tell Marcus to bring the family SUV to the garage, not returning to the mansion. Eleanor cut him off. Contact Silver Lake Private Maternity Center. The neonatal medical transport I booked should have arrived. Go down to the NICU and follow the nurses to escort the 3 babies into the transport vehicle. Julian was stunned. Silver Lake? That is the top private facility in the state, highest security. Madam, when did you book that? Silver Lake is where Mr. Vance intended to book, but I booked it with my own card. Eleanor picked up the bag and walked out. But Eleanor stopped and turned to look at him. You are just Harrison's assistant. If you find this difficult, you can return to the company and work right now. I will push my own wheelchair down. Julian's Adam's apple bobbed, swallowing the rest of his words. He stepped forward quickly and took the bag from Eleanor's hand. I will push the wheelchair for you. 2 hours later, in a private penthouse suite at Silver Lake Private Maternity Center. Inside the climate-controlled glass room, the three tiny babies lay in their monitoring cribs, their small chests rising and falling weakly. Eleanor sat on the sofa outside the glass wall, holding a cup of warm water. There was a knock on the suite door. Lawyer Victoria Kensington pushed the door open and walked in. She wore a sharp charcoal gray suit. Closing the door, she heavily placed her briefcase on the coffee table. "You are insane." Victoria pulled up a chair and sat down, frowning. 4 days post-C-section, just barely survived a massive hemorrhage. "You skip hospitalization and decide to transfer facilities and move out?" Eleanor placed her cup on the table, pulled a black USB drive from her canvas bag, and pushed it toward Victoria. "What is this?" Victoria asked. "Scans of the original drafts and the core curriculum system of Harrison's education group." Eleanor leaned back against the sofa, her voice calm. "Every design I created 7 years ago has a digital watermark and a personal timestamp." Victoria sucked in a breath, looking up at her sharply. "There is more." Eleanor pushed over a thick stack of printed papers. Over the past 6 months, Harrison has transferred 7 consulting fees under the company's name from corporate accounts to Vanessa Sterling's personal business account, totaling $450,000. I have marked all the transaction ID numbers. Victoria opened the first page, her eyes quickly scanning the red circles. Her fingers paused. "Since when have you been collecting this?" "When I was 5 months pregnant?" Eleanor looked at the babies in the climate-controlled room. "I found a receipt for Van Cleef and Arpels jewelry in his suit pocket." Victoria looked at the woman in front of her. Her face was pale, needing pillows just to sit up, yet suddenly she seemed somewhat unfamiliar. She had thought Eleanor called her here to cry about her husband's betrayal, to ask how to salvage this marriage. "What do you want to do?" Victoria closed the folder. "I already had Harrison's mother deliver the divorce papers to him." Eleanor looked into Victoria's eyes. "I want absolute full custody of the 3 children and my rightful share of the marital assets. If he does not agree, we will take it to court. Harrison will not let go easily. His net worth right now, once it involves dividing corporate shares, the entire board of directors will be shaken. That is his problem." Eleanor cast her eyes down. "You just need to tell me if this evidence is enough to request an asset freeze." "It is enough." Victoria tucked the USB into her bag. "Leave it to me." After Victoria left, the suite returned to a dead silence. The effects of the painkillers were rapidly wearing off. Eleanor supported herself against the wall, inching her way into the bathroom and closing the door, isolating herself from the light outside. She leaned on the sink, looking up at herself in the mirror. Strands of hair were stuck to her cheeks from sweat. Her eye sockets were sunken, her lips cracked and peeling. She slowly pulled up her loose hospital gown. A dark red, centipede-like suture line 1/2 foot long lay across her lower abdomen. The surrounding skin was heavily bruised from the massive hemorrhage and her forced exertion to get out of bed. A massive wave of exhaustion coupled with pain instantly buckled her knees. Eleanor collapsed limply onto the toilet lid, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Cold sweat stung her eyes, and suppressed, jagged breaths escaped her throat. Suddenly, a faint baby's cry echoed from the climate-controlled room outside. Eleanor's trembling stopped abruptly. She lifted her head, violently wiping the moisture from her face. Using both hands on the wall, she stood straight up. She turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on her face, wiped it roughly with a towel, pushed open the bathroom door, and walked out. At 3:00 p.m., back in the VIP suite on the top floor of Manhattan General Hospital, Harrison Vance pushed the door open, tossing the limited edition orange Hermes box onto the sofa. "Eleanor, look what I brought you." The London acquisition dragged on, and my flight was delayed. The room was dead silent, the bed flat as ice. Beatrice Vance had her back to him, packing her thermos. Harrison loosened his tie. "Where is Eleanor?" "Taking the kids for a checkup?" Beatrice turned around, looking at his bespoke suit. Her eyes turned cold. "She signed her discharge papers this morning." Harrison's fingers stopped on his tie. "She went back to the mansion?" He scoffed. "I told Julian to arrange the best medical team. She just has to throw a tantrum over this." Beatrice said nothing, just placed a thin paper on the Hermes box. "This is what she left for you." Harrison's eyes fell on the bold divorce petition. His smile froze. "Mom, you let her throw a fit here?" He pushed the paper away. "Where can a woman take 3 premature babies?" "Tell Maria to bring her back. I won't stop her." Beatrice looked at him. "When she nearly died on the operating table, where were you?" Harrison choked. his knuckles turning white. The European merger was at a critical stage. I couldn't leave. I arranged for people to care for her. Who am I making all this money for? Isn't it for this family? Beatrice sighed, picking up her bag. Harrison, you do not deserve her. The door closed. Harrison stood alone. He stared at the divorce petition, his breathing growing heavy. He grabbed his phone and called Maria at the mansion. Has Madam returned home? Maria sounded panicked. Sir, Madam hasn't returned, but before she left, she hired a moving company to clear out all her belongings from the estate. Harrison's footsteps halted. Half an hour later, a black Maybach slammed its brakes in front of the estate gates. Harrison rushed inside. The living room was immaculate, but when he opened the shoe cabinet, Eleanor's maternity flats were gone. He ran upstairs to the master bedroom and tore open the closet. Her half of the space was entirely empty, leaving only wooden hangers. The vanity was cleared. The double toothbrush cups in the bathroom now held a single, lonely cup. No torn clothes, no smashed picture frames, no angry letters left behind. The room was so empty, it was as if Eleanor had never existed there. Harrison swallowed hard, pulling out his phone to call Eleanor. It rang. Where are you? Harrison suppressed his twitching eyelid, forcing the tone of a calm authority figure. When you are done acting out, tell Julian your address and I will send a car. You just had surgery, you shouldn't be out in the wind. The voice on the other end was deadpan, like a dried-up straight line. Did you receive the divorce petition? Harrison's grip tightened. Eleanor, I won't sign it. That paper has no legal weight. Do not use divorce to test my limits. Those are your limits, not mine, Eleanor said lightly. What exactly do you want? Harrison's voice rose. I have explained the Vanessa situation multiple times. It is not easy for her working alone overseas. I just have a responsibility to look out for her. Now, over this baseless jealousy, you run away from home with 3 infants? The luxury condo under Vanessa's name. The down payment was wired from my secondary card. Eleanor's emotionless voice cut him off. Harrison's breathing instantly hitched. You investigated my accounts? The court's asset freeze order will be delivered to the corporate legal department tomorrow morning. Eleanor did not answer his question, delivering her conclusion directly. Harrison, see you in court. The call disconnected. Harrison stood frozen in the middle of the master bedroom. Outside, the wind blew, billowing the empty curtains. He looked down at the empty closet, the blood draining from his knuckles. Monday morning, Boardroom 1 on the top floor of the Harrison Vance Education Group headquarters. The massive black walnut table was filled with top executives. Harrison stood before a huge screen, pointing a laser at the fourth quarter merger map, projecting total confidence. The European operations must finalize their funding disbursements before the end of the month. Finance moved 20% of the reserve funds by Wednesday. The frosted glass door was violently pushed open. Arthur Brooks, the chief legal officer, rushed in, ignoring the shocked stares of the executives, and walked straight to Harrison, lowering his voice. But in the quiet room, his words were clear. Mr. Vance, the court officials are here. This is the asset freeze order from Mrs. Vance. Arthur handed over a legally stamped document, his forehead dripping with cold sweat. All Tier 1 bank accounts under your personal name and the corporate shares you represent were completely frozen 10 minutes ago. The massive boardroom plunged into silence. Dozens of eyes fixed on Harrison. The laser pointer in his hand wavered, the red dot trembling on the white wall. He looked down, scanning the order. Under the petitioner column, the name Eleanor Vance acted like 2 steel nails, driving freezing cold straight into his retinas. His jaw clenched tight. Harrison slammed his folder shut. That is all for today's meeting. Finance and the merger team stay, everyone else out. The room quickly cleared. Harrison threw the document onto the table. How long to unfreeze it? Arthur swallowed. The evidence Mrs. Vance provided is incredibly thorough. It includes a massive amount of original transaction records and copied files. Through standard procedures, it will take at least 3 months, maybe 6. But if the petitioner voluntarily withdraws the suit, it can be unfrozen within 24 hours, Harrison sneered, tapping his fingers on the table. The depths of his eyes held the outrage and disdain of an authority figure being challenged. Tell PR to suppress this news. She is just throwing a tantrum. Let her freeze it for a few days. Once she calms down and realizes the real world is not child's play, she will withdraw the suit herself. Returning to his CEO office, Harrison sat down. Julian placed a dark roast black coffee on the edge of the desk. Did you find out where she is? Harrison rubbed his throbbing temples. Yes. Silver Lake Private Maternity Center. Julian kept his head down. Mrs. Vance booked the top-floor independent suite. Security is very high. Without an appointment, you cannot get in. Harrison opened his right drawer, took out a black checkbook, signed a number, and tore it off. Then he opened the safe below and took out a dark green velvet box. It was a $1 million diamond bracelet he had casually picked up at a boutique in Geneva after buying a necklace for Vanessa. Over the past 7 years, he had grown accustomed to this routine. Every time he came home late from a banquet, every time he missed her prenatal checkup, or like this time, missed the delivery, he used this method to compensate. And Eleanor would always quietly accept it, swallow her disappointment, and pour him a glass of warm water, continuing to be the flawless Mrs. Vance. He put the box and check into his inner pocket. The door opened, and Vanessa walked in on high heels holding a report. She was wearing Chanel's new early autumn collection and the ruby necklace he had gifted her. Harrison, my factory has to make its final payment today, but finance said your personal account didn't go through. Her voice carried a perfectly calibrated tone of grievance. Harrison looked at her. For some reason, looking at Vanessa's exquisite face, the image of that stark white hospital bed flashed in his mind. The account is temporarily frozen. Go through the corporate account and have the vice president approve it. Harrison withdrew his gaze. Vanessa froze, quickly sensing his foul mood. What is wrong? Is Eleanor still throwing a fit? Do you want me to go explain it to her personally? There really is nothing between us. For her to freeze your accounts and impact company operations is too unreasonable. She has no idea how hard you work in your position. Harrison's brow furrowed sharply. Just manage your factory. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, his voice ice cold. My family affairs are not for you to comment on. Vanessa's face instantly paled, standing frozen. Harrison did not spare her another glance, striding out of the office. Julian, get the car ready for Silver Lake. At 2:00 p.m., in the VIP lounge of the Silver Lake Maternity Center. Eleanor wore a cream-colored loungewear set, sitting in a single sofa chair, her back straight. On her lap was a printed business plan for an independent early childhood education center. Harrison walked in, bringing a chill from outside. His gaze swept the luxurious room and landed on Eleanor's pale face. He sat opposite her, habitually crossing his legs and leaning back, assuming total control like at a negotiation table. Not a bad environment. $50,000 a day. You sure know how to spend my money. Harrison loosened his tie, his tone full of upper hand certainty. Looks like you have rested well these past few days. Eleanor turned a page in the business plan without looking up. The deposit and final payment for this suite were transferred from the savings account of my education consulting firm from 7 years ago. Her voice was devoid of emotion. It has nothing to do with our marital accounts. Harrison's eyelid twitched. He hadn't expected her to calculate every penny so meticulously. He placed the velvet box on the coffee table, then slid the check underneath it. All right, you've thrown your tantrum for 4 days, moved out, hired a lawyer to make a huge scene, froze my accounts, and even dragged my mother into it to slam that garbage divorce paper in my face. You've had your fun. Harrison looked at her, his tone softening as if coaxing a pouting child. This bracelet is the limited edition you saw in the Paris magazine. The check is for $10 million. Spend it however you want. As for the delivery, I was wrong. The European merger really tied me up. I promise, for the next 3 months, aside from mandatory board meetings, I will come home to the mansion every night. Now, tell your lawyer to withdraw the suit, and let's go home. Eleanor finally looked away from the business plan. She looked at the box, then at Harrison. Her eyes were terrifyingly calm, like a dried-up ancient well. I don't need the bracelet, and I don't need the money. Then what do you need? Harrison frowned, impatience gathering in his eyes. He leaned forward. Eleanor, don't push it. You are a mother who just gave birth to 3 kids, barely able to walk. What leverage do you have to demand a divorce? Do you really think those lesson plans you drew in that basement years ago can threaten the foundation of this group? Eleanor closed the business plan. I am not using scrap paper to threaten you. She leaned forward and pressed the intercom on the table. Bring it in, Harrison sneered. You still have the mood for afternoon tea? Harrison, did you think I used divorce to make you bow your head? What else? Harrison retorted, feeling entirely justified. It's been 7 years. Every time, you swallow your grievances and wait for me to coax you. You have no career. Your social circle revolves around me. You cannot leave this family. A waiter brought in a tray, placed 2 cups of coffee down, and quietly retreated. Eleanor pushed the cup of Americano in front of Harrison forward. Vanessa Sterling is the registered legal representative of her factory, correct? Eleanor suddenly spoke. Harrison's pupils constricted, his fingers gripping the fabric of his pants. How do you know? He asked instinctively, his perfect facade cracking. Not only that, Eleanor's tone was leisurely, like reading a financial report. Last year, on May 12th, you helped her factory secure the municipal land plot in Southside Tech Park. You used corporate reserve funds to personally guarantee it for her. Harrison's breath stopped. He stared at her, realizing for the first time he didn't know this woman. He thought she was just a full-time wife researching baby food. How did she know the highest classified cash flows of the corporation? So what? Harrison forced his aura, trying to regain control. I explained, she contributed to the company. I helped her find her footing. It's a win-win. Don't let petty female jealousy twist business matters. May 12th of last year. Eleanor repeated the date, looking into his eyes. Harrison froze. That was the day I had my amniocentesis, Eleanor said, her voice completely steady. That morning in the hospital corridor, you told me you had a closed-door board meeting and your phone would be off all day. Harrison's Adam's apple bobbed violently. He opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. A cold sweat broke out on his back. I waited alone in that corridor for 4 hours. When the needle pierced my abdomen, the woman in the next bed had her husband holding her hand. I only had a crumpled antiseptic wipe. Eleanor looked straight at him. Right at that moment, you were at the Southside Real Estate Exchange, signing a guarantee for Vanessa. Harrison abruptly leaned forward, his voice finally carrying real panic. Eleanor, that day I really just stopped by to sign for her. I went right back to the office. Why didn't you ask me? Taste the coffee. Eleanor cut off his weak explanation, gesturing to the cup. Harrison looked down at the coffee, frowning. I don't drink sweetened Americanos. You know, I only drink dark roast black coffee. Eleanor's lips curled into a cold confirmation. Yes, you only drink bitter black coffee. You don't drink sweetened coffee. She looked at him. But you never asked me what I like to drink. Harrison stiffened. 7 years ago in that basement, we only had enough money for 1 cup of coffee a day to stay awake. Because you liked the bitterness of black coffee, for 7 years I brewed it for you every morning. I also drank sugarless black coffee for 7 years. Eleanor pushed the $10 million check and the velvet box back across the table, establishing a clear boundary. Harrison. I hate the bitter taste. Harrison's gaze fell on the rejected box, his heart seized by an invisible hand. A panic he had never felt before, accompanied by the collapse of a solid structure, rushed from his feet to his head. The things you gifted, the money you transferred, were always to soothe your own guilt, to maintain your facade as a successful man, not to meet my needs. Eleanor stood up. Because of her incision, her movements were slow, but her back was straight, her eyes sharp as blades. You thought I was the Eleanor who would stay in place, treating your sporadic scraps of charity like gold. But that Eleanor died on the operating table 5 days ago. Harrison scrambled to stand up. His knee hit the edge of the marble coffee table, knocking over the sweetened Americano. The brown liquid dripped onto the carpet, forming an unremovable stain. I will not sign. Harrison looked at her, his eyes red, jaw clenched. His voice carried the panic of a trapped beast and a hollow threat. Eleanor, don't even think about leaving. You have no chance of getting custody. Your old, defunct studio can't feed 3 kids. How will you survive without me? Eleanor turned her back to him. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, my lawyer will officially submit the complete list of evidence of your marital asset transfers to third parties to the court. She left a clear conclusion. We owe each other nothing. Harrison, do not look for me again. She pushed the door and walked out. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, sealing off Harrison's heavy breathing and the mess inside. Eleanor leaned against the cold wall, enduring the pain that felt like a rusted saw blade dragging across her abdomen. Her phone buzzed wildly. She took a deep breath, fighting off a dizzy spell, and answered. Eleanor, the supplementary documents for the asset freeze have been fully accepted by the court. Victoria Kensington's voice was decisive. Harrison's legal team just contacted me privately. Their tone has softened. They want to settle out of court, offering very attractive terms. No settlement. Eleanor stood up, walking toward the NICU. Prepare the absolute custody lawsuit and the core curriculum copyright injunction as planned. Tell them I concede nothing. Understood. Eleanor stood before the sterile glass of the NICU. The nurse was burping the third baby. Eleanor pressed her palm against the cold glass. She exhaled a long breath. The pain, the fear, the 7 years of sunk costs, and Harrison's panicked face were wiped clean from her mind. A new trajectory had begun. Wednesday afternoon, Harrison's CEO office. Chief Legal Officer Arthur Brooks placed a thick lawsuit copy on the black marble desk, his forehead sweating. Mr. Vance, this is the official lawsuit and evidence list. Victoria Kensington has requested an injunction against the group's core curriculum system. If approved, all our online courses and franchise authorizations for the second half of the year must be suspended immediately. Harrison paused, reviewing a merger agreement. The core curriculum is a work for hire. She was a stay-at-home wife for 7 years. On what grounds can she demand an injunction? Arthur brought up a scanned document on his tablet. This is the key evidence. 3 months before the group was officially incorporated, Mrs. Vance registered the copyrights for the entire underlying logic and interactive framework of the curriculum under her personal name at the U.S. Copyright Office. Arthur pointed to the fine print. In the authorization letter she signed back then, there was an addendum stating that this royalty-free authorization is valid only during the marriage of both parties. Once divorce proceedings commence, the authorization automatically terminates. Harrison stared at the glaring words. His thumb pressed so hard against his fountain pen that his knuckles turned white. She guarded against me 7 years ago. Arthur bowed his head. Victoria Kensington is known for being ruthless. They are not just revoking the copyright, they claim all commercial profits generated from it over the last 7 years are marital assets, demanding a division heavily in her favor. Harrison slammed his pen down. Dream on. Tell PR and finance to get ready. Mobilize all available cash. She wants to sue? I will play along. Let's see how a woman with zero income affords Victoria's exorbitant legal fees. 3 days later, in the pre-trial mediation room of the district court, Eleanor sat on the left side of the long table, wearing a crisp black cashmere blazer, her hair tied neatly, her posture perfectly straight. Harrison and his 3 lawyers walked in. He sat opposite her, pulling his tie. Eleanor, do you have to make this so ugly? Harrison exerted his usual pressure. Once the injunction hits, our stock will drop by at least 20%. If the company goes bankrupt, your marital assets will plummet too. Did Victoria teach you this mutually destructive suicide pact? Eleanor didn't reply. She glanced at Victoria. Victoria pulled out a file and slid it toward Harrison. Mr. Vance, this is the supplementary asset freeze request from Mrs. Vance. Harrison didn't look at it. I didn't come here to split pennies. I can give you dry shares in the company, provided you drop the injunction and yield custody of the kids to me. You can visit any time. No, Eleanor said flatly. Eleanor, wake up. Harrison leaned forward. How will you raise 3 kids? You haven't worked in 7 years, have no assets in your name, and you're postpartum. The judge looks at objective living conditions, not blind maternal love. Give them to me, they'll get elite educations. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes calm, and pushed the file 1 inch closer. Look at page 4. Harrison frowned, opening the file. Lawyer Arthur glanced at it and went pale. It was a clear photocopy of an offshore trust registration in the Cayman Islands. Eleanor looked at Harrison's frozen face. The beneficiary is Vanessa Sterling's younger brother. 3 years ago in April, you funneled $20 million in European profits into this account through underground channels. Harrison's pupils contracted. You. His throat felt stuffed with cotton. The transfer was highly classified, even Arthur didn't know. 3 years ago in April, Eleanor continued relentlessly. During my first pregnancy, I suffered a severe hemorrhage. While I was in the operating room having a surgical procedure, you were in the Cayman Islands with Vanessa's brother, finalizing the trust transfer. Harrison's fingers crumpled the paper. That money was for tax evasion, not for Vanessa, he croaked. Save that defense for the judge, Eleanor cut him off. Transferring massive marital assets offshore. Harrison, under marital law, you will forfeit this portion entirely. She leaned back, looking at the completely derailed man. As for the living conditions you mentioned, Eleanor placed a silver key on the table. I bought a standalone villa in Monterey Bay in full cash last week. Additionally, I sold the exclusive European rights to the Starlight Interactive module to your competitor, Apex Early Learning, for $3 million post-tax. Harrison stared at the key, his mind buzzing. The Starlight module was a side project Eleanor sketched 7 years ago, shelved because they lacked funds. He had no idea she kept the patent, let alone its commercial value. She had secured her exit route long ago, quietly watching him parade his ego in front of her. I not only have a house and savings, but I also have full time to accompany them as they grow. Eleanor crossed her hands. Unlike you, who didn't even have time to sign for your children's birth. The room was silent. Harrison felt a chilling cold rise from his feet, paralyzing his limbs. Mediation failed. Eleanor stood up, buttoning her blazer. Let's go, Victoria. We will see him in court. At 8:00 p.m., at the Vance estate, Harrison's Maybach screeched to a halt. He stormed into the living room, his tie loose, eyes bloodshot. Mom! Beatrice Vance walked down the stairs, carrying a small suitcase. Mom, Eleanor has gone crazy. She wants to freeze everything and take absolute custody. The trial is next Friday, you have to help me. Harrison gripped the sofa. Tell the judge she has postpartum depression, that she's unstable. I'll arrange for you to stay at my place to show we provide the best environment. Beatrice slammed a glass of water onto the table. She looked at her son with profound exhaustion and sorrow. She pulled a thick folder from her bag and threw it on the table. This is the final divorce settlement her lawyer sent this afternoon. Beatrice's voice was hoarse. She said if you sign it, she might drop the criminal charges for corporate embezzlement. If not, she hands the evidence to the Financial Crimes Bureau. Harrison's eye twitched. Mom, even you are taking her side? I am your son. Because you are my son, I am ashamed. Beatrice pointed a shaking finger. Do you know where I went today? I went to Silver Lake to see my grandchildren. Her eyes were red. I looked through the glass. The nurses told me Eleanor couldn't sleep from the pain, but refused painkillers so she could breastfeed. She sat alone in the bathroom, biting a towel. Harrison's breath stopped. She didn't complain to me once. She only showed me 2 things. The ledger of your transfers to that Vanessa woman, and the critical condition notice she signed for herself in the delivery room. Mom, that notice was because I was overseas. Shut up, Beatrice snapped. You still think it was just a missed flight? She showed me the 17 missed calls. Julian was crying in the hallway, and you were busy cutting a cake for that woman. Beatrice took a deep breath, tears falling. When you failed 7 years ago and owed over $1 million, Eleanor sold her dowry house to live with you in a $600 basement. She cooked for you, drew for you, held this family up. Now you have money, and you find her bothersome. Harrison gripped the settlement papers, the edge slicing his finger. I won't go to the trial, Beatrice said, walking toward the door. Tomorrow morning I am moving to Monterey Bay. Eleanor agreed to let me help watch the kids. Mom, what about me? Beatrice didn't look back. Harrison, mistakes have a price. When you had nothing, she never despised you. Now you have everything, and you don't deserve her. The door closed heavily. Monday morning, in the corporate archives. Harrison, looking disheveled, stood before rows of cabinets. Find it, he barked at the sweating archive staff. Find the lease agreements and equipment invoices from 2017 to prove the curriculum was created on company property. Mr. Vance, the manager stuttered. There are no leases or equipment lists from 2017. Julian Pierce stepped in. Mr. Vance, we didn't have an administration department back then. The registered address was a basement. You didn't buy computers. You only had a used Lenovo laptop Mrs. Vance brought from college. Julian placed a taped-up cardboard box on the table. Your mother went to the mansion yesterday and had someone dig this out of the basement storage. Harrison cut the tape open. A musty smell arose. Inside were no corporate secrets, just letter-sized papers held by cheap binder clips, worn notebooks, and messy hospital bills. Beatrice Vance entered the room. Stop looking in the archives. The origins of your empire are in these old notebooks. She tossed a worn notebook in front of Harrison. Harrison opened the first page. It was a hand-drawn interactive interface, annotated in red ink. In the bottom right corner was a dried, dark brown stain. Blood. Winter of 2018. The heating pipes broke. You had a high fever, Beatrice said heavily. Eleanor wore 2 coats and fingerless gloves, sitting by the drafty window to draw these. Her hands cracked from the cold, bleeding onto the paper. She wouldn't even buy new paper, saying it was company property. Harrison's fingers stiffened. You told me back then, when you made money, you'd give her the biggest house in the city, Beatrice scoffed. You did. Then you left her alone in it for weeks at a time. Julian stepped forward, pulling a small black leather notebook from the box. Mr. Vance, this is from her deepest drawer. She told me to shred it. Harrison flipped it open. His eyelid twitched wildly. October 12th, year 3, our anniversary. He said he had an important client. Came home at 9 p.m. Julian posted a story of Vanessa cutting a cake at the peninsula. I drank the soup myself. It is okay. He is a CEO now. Harrison looked up at Julian. Julian met his gaze coldly. You threw a birthday party for Director Sterling that night. I thought Mrs. Vance didn't know. Turns out, she just didn't speak of it. Harrison flipped to the next page. March, year 5. First IVF failed. Severe hemorrhage. The nurse told me to call family for the surgical procedure. I called him 6 times. He was busy. He wired me $50,000 to buy supplements. The sound of the surgical tools was so loud, I realized $50,000 couldn't buy back the child I lost. All color drained from Harrison's face. He thought it was just an accidental miscarriage. He didn't know she lay alone on a cold operating table. August, year 6. Pregnant with triplets. High risk. 8th progesterone shot today. Found a plane ticket to Paris in his suit pocket. Vanessa's fashion week. He lied about a closed-door board meeting. I don't hurt anymore. After struggling so long, it turns out it doesn't hurt at all. The notebook slipped from Harrison's hands, thudding onto the desk. He stumbled back, hitting a filing cabinet. She knew everything. He muttered, his voice breaking. Why didn't she fight with me? Because she died a little bit each time over the years. Beatrice threw a handful of hospital bills at him. Look at these. She went to checkups alone, faced premature birth alone. While you bought bags for another woman? The top bill on the floor was the emergency triplet delivery invoice. The family signature line just had Eleanor scribbled alone. Julian took off his ID badge, placing it on the table. This is the last time I call you Mr. Vance. I submitted my resignation. The handover was completed yesterday. Where are you going? To Monterey Bay. Mrs. Vance's early education center needs an operations director. Julian bowed slightly. Mr. Vance, you always thought Mrs. Vance relied on you for shelter. But without her foundation, your building collapsed long ago. You personally lost the best woman in the world. Julian and Beatrice left the room. Harrison stood alone amidst the yellowed blueprints and blood-stained bills. He picked up the black notebook again. The last line read, Year 7, massive hemorrhage. I thought I would die, but I only thought of my children. Harrison didn't answer the phone. I can finally let go. Harrison's knees buckled. A colossal panic, like a tsunami, crashed into his chest. He realized he hadn't raised Eleanor. Her endurance, talent, blood, and tears had propped up his entire existence. And now, she had pulled the foundation away. He dialed her number. The robotic voice of the operator informed him the number was disconnected. The phone dropped, shattering. He punched the steel cabinet, his knuckles bleeding, but he felt no physical pain, only an agonizing emptiness. 3 months later, at Starlight Education in Monterey Bay, Eleanor placed a wooden puzzle piece on the table. Julian walked in with a stamped document. Apex Early Learning rolled out the new module to 50 locations. Here is the first quarter revenue share. Eleanor signed it. Beatrice wheeled out the 3 babies. Eleanor smiled. Thank you, Mom. Eleanor walked toward the meeting room, her heels clicking steadily. Meanwhile, Harrison sat in his office, looking at Starlight Education's brochure featuring Eleanor as chief architect. Arthur Brooks reported, the court upheld the injunction. Our online courses are taken down. Franchisees demand refunds. With your personal accounts frozen, our cash flow is dead. What is her company's valuation? $80 million. Harrison closed his eyes. The woman he neglected had built an empire without him. At 9:00 p.m. on the commercial street in Monterey Bay, a black Maybach parked in the shadows. Harrison sat inside, watching the brightly lit Starlight Education Center across the street. Eleanor was discussing plans with young executives, smiling radiantly. A confident, relaxed smile he hadn't seen in 7 years. A white SUV pulled up. Beatrice waved from inside. Eleanor and Julian loaded the babies, and the car drove off. Eleanor never once looked toward the shadows. Harrison realized she wasn't holding on to hate. He simply didn't exist in her world anymore. 1 year later, inside the district court execution hall, Harrison pressed his ink-stained thumbprint onto the bankruptcy liquidation order. The judge stated his corporate and personal assets were handed over for auction. Harrison's bespoke suit now hung loosely on his gaunt frame, his hair a third gray. He walked out of the court. A Starlight Education truck drove past. He touched a VIP invitation in his pocket to the Asian Early Education Innovation Summit. He went to the convention center and stood in the dark back corner. A former vice president saw him. Did you hear? Everyone knows Mrs. Vance was the real architect. In 1 year, Starlight took 60% of the premium market. The lights dimmed. Eleanor stepped into the spotlight in a minimalist white suit. When we treat every response as a given, and every companionship as something to be compensated with material goods, we lose our right to educate. The same goes for relationships and businesses. Thunderous applause erupted. She didn't mention Harrison. She had risen to a height he could never reach, crushing the rotten past beneath her feet. In the VIP hallway afterward, Harrison intercepted her. Julian tried to block him, but Eleanor stopped him. She looked at Harrison like a stranger. Mr. Vance, is there something you need? Harrison handed over a crisp document with shaking hands. This is all my remaining personal assets, the overseas copyright I bought back from Apex, and a clean offshore trust. No debts. Beneficiaries are the 3 kids. I know it's useless now, but they are clean. Take it as compensation. Eleanor didn't take it. Are you still playing this self-touching charade? The copyright from Apex was legally voided for breach of contract 3 weeks ago. And that clean trust? Vanessa's brother took out loan shark debts in Las Vegas. The underlying assets were liquidated 3 months ago. Harrison's breath stopped. His final card was trash she had already seen through. You have nothing left, Eleanor delivered the final sentence. You have nothing to give me, and no right to discuss compensation. Harrison's knees gave out, sliding down the marble wall. The document fluttered to the floor. Eleanor told Julian, tell security to be more careful with the guest list. She walked away, her heels clicking, without a single glance back. Outside, the white SUV waited. The kids called out to her. Eleanor smiled brilliantly, hugging them as she got in. The car drove off into the bright sunlight. In the quiet hallway, Harrison sat on the cold floor, burying his face in his hands. There was no hysterical crying, just his empty shoulders shaking violently. In this brilliant backstage, Harrison stepped wide awake into an endless regret, where, for the rest of his life, no one would ever ask about him again.